Howdy gamers, in this video I'm going to be going over my thoughts on the reworked Fiddlesticks runes. Nothing's set in stone, and this is a lot of just what my opinions are on the new Fiddlesticks, as I've been playing a lot of it, and that's not everything. It's just I've been thinking about it, I've been playing it, I've been feeling it, and I think I have a better understanding than most people on how the runes function on him and like what really is needed and then what isn't. So first off, I think your only keystone options are really in the domination tree. Your major ones being Electrocute, Dark Harvest, and Predator. Something like Unsealed Spellbook might be okay, but with Fiddlesticks, he is so reliant on dealing damage that missing out on damage from the Keystones to trade that off for utility really, really does suck. And Fiddlesticks also really needs Nimbus Cloak. Um, and the utility of Nimbus Cloak is so high that if you were to go Unsealed Spellbook and then Nimbus Cloak, you're missing out on damage from not only one of the domination tree keystones, but then also sudden impact or cheap shot, but probably just sudden impact, as it's just so important that, and there's way more utility to give Fiddlesticks himself than you could potentially give your entire team with something like Unsealed Spellbook, which it's a fringe option anyways, but is one worth considering with the nature of this champion, where he can be kind of supportive, but in my opinion, at least for now, and the way I think you should probably always approach it in solo queue, is just get the most damage for yourself, carry the game through those means. Maybe if Fiddlesticks became like genuinely overpowered, something like Unsealed Spellbook might pop up, especially in a region like LCK or something. But for the Keystones again, I think that Electrocute is his most valuable Keystone. I think that Dark Harvest has its place, and I don't think that Predator is that valuable. Starting off with Predator, I think that it's a pretty misguided approach to playing Fiddlesticks because this champion is so interesting in the way that he can farm. I have many videos, they're in the description. They're also, there's a link now, but he's so interesting in the way that he can farm because he can farm two camps at once to open up or at the start of the game. And then whenever he's doing this, if the enemy tries to vertical jungle him, then he can do the exact same thing to them, but then farm faster. So he can always outpace the enemy jungler usually. Only champions that will beat him will be like fast clearing jungles such as Shyvana, Karthus, etc. I'm getting too excited. With Predator, you get the utility in which you could approach for ganks, but the ganks that you're going to get off with Predator are kind of unnecessary, and you probably have to skip camps to do them. The best utility I found in Predator is like using the active whenever you're fighting around objectives, but then it's like reminding the entire enemy team that Fiddlesticks is in the game, and you're really doing yourself a disservice at that point too. Another thing with Predator is that it gives you extra movement speed before you damage a champion or even minions, and that's a big issue I have with it. Is that even if you're using it, let's say right before you ult, if you're ulting into a lane, that extra movement speed is going to go away once you damage anything. So naturally your ult is going to be hitting minions first, so you're not even getting extra distance with the ult from that. And then you don't get to choose the target that you deal the extra damage to, unlike Electrocute or Dark Harvest. With Electrocute, you're always choosing the target that you're singling out because of your Q. And like whenever you ult now, you ult QE and then kind of run the enemy down. But with those two instances of damage, along with your smite and then also your W, you get to choose the target that you're bursting with Electrocute, and all the other damage is kind of icing on the cake. So I think that Electrocute's the best keystone. For that reason, it makes singling out a target better. It gives you early game damage, which is very important. If you can't, like, it just makes your ganks more successful, it makes your skirmishes more successful. It makes, if the enemy's trying to attack you early, that you have a little bit of damage just to, battle them. With Dark Harvest, it's not a terrible rune, but you trade off a lot early, which can be fine for Fiddlesticks. Especially at higher MMRs, maybe it's okay. I haven't felt it that much, and it's really hard to tell, it being that he's been released for like 2 days now. But I think Dark Harvest is okay. The benefit of Dark Harvest is that you can proc it onto multiple enemies in a team fight, so your ult could be more impactful in that sense. But it really feels like a 1v9 rune, and then with how the game plays out and how much damage that you get through your itemization anyways, I don't think that Fiddlesticks needs this. And I think he actually does trade off a lot by not running Electrocute. So The Keystone that I'm going to be recommending for Fiddlesticks Rework Jungle is Electrocute. With Electrocute, hitting an enemy champion with 3 separate attacks or abilities within 3 seconds deals bonus adaptive damage. This damage is based on your level and then also based on your ability power, which Fiddlesticks has a lot of options in his itemization. So you could get that 0.2 to pretty high values. And then it's on a 25 to 20 second cooldown, so most stages of the game, it's around a 23 second cooldown. And with that, you could gank one lane, farm one camp, gank another lane, and then get 2 Electrocute procs off. You could skirmish with the enemy jungler, farm 2 camps, and then gank a lane, and then get the Electrocute proc off again. Like I mentioned before, the downside of it is that you can only use it on the one target. But with the way that Fiddlesticks' damage comes out, you really do get to choose the target in a team fight. It's not just like wasted on a tank as you go in. So long that you're spending your abilities correctly. For the secondary runes, I don't have a definite opinion on whether Cheap Shot or Sudden Impact is better, but I do think that Sudden Impact should be better. Given the nature of Fiddlesticks, his kit, you're not skirmishing early a lot, which is when Cheap Shot's really, really strong. But Cheap Shot isn't bad because, similar to Electrocute, it does give you access to a lot of early damage. But with Sudden Impact, whenever you're attacking from the Fog of War or using your ults or using Proto Belt, then you would get the value out of Sudden Impact, where you gain the 7 lethality and 6 magic penetration for 5 seconds. The problem with Fiddlesticks is that he's only using that 6 magic penetration. The benefit of this is that whenever you're ulting, you can get hundreds of damage from this rune versus very small amounts of true damage from Cheap Shot. So it is a huge trade-off. Like, if you're playing for skirmishes and whatnot, Cheap Shot isn't bad, but like the extra damage that Sudden Impact adds whenever you're ulting is really, really significant, and it scales way harder than Cheap Shot. So I guess pick one depending on like the champions you're playing with. Pretty easily put, skirmishing and fighting all the time no matter what, Cheap Shot's going to be giving you more value. But if you're farming early and then taking some fights and then farming mid game and then ulting late game, then Sudden Impact's always going to be better. For the third rune, you're really choosing how you get the ability power from these. Zombie Ward is through clearing wards, and then you get the benefit of placing a ward whenever you clear one. Ghost Poro, you get it through placing wards, which with your effigies, I think Ghost Poro works really, really, really well. And then Eyeball Collection, you get it through getting kills and assist. Eyeball Collection is okay in solo queue like always because a lot of kills happen. But with Fiddlesticks, I think Ghost Poro gains so much value because of the way that your effigies work. And the way that you're going to be spending the effigies early is to defend your own jungle, or whenever you vertical jungle or invade the enemy jungler, you can have this like continual vision for yourself, your laners, or on the enemy, because the effigies last for longer than trinket wards. And then with Ghost Poro, you're extending the duration of the time in which you have vision of the area. And then whenever your effigies would expire, it places a Ghost Poro. That gives you extra ability power, and then you have vision of that same area for longer. So, especially in the early game, putting this around objectives whenever they're spawning is so strong. You get to have vision on those objectives for so much longer, and that gives you time to really just full clear and then be sitting in a lane if you want to, or to do the objectives yourself. Really, really valuable rune, and I don't know a champion that uses Ghost Poro better without just spamming wards and base to get the ability power or attack damage from it. So, best option for Fiddlesticks. If you're a greedy piece of shit, I suppose Eyeball Collection's fine too. But Ghost Poro is just so high value for Fiddlesticks compared to other champions. For the fourth rune here, I really think your only option is Relentless Hunter. If you don't have this rune on this champion, you suck. Like, you don't move around the map at all. It really, really feels bad. And that's another reason I don't like Predator either, is because, well, Predator got to run Ingenious Hunter, but without Relentless Hunter, your movements around the map really, really, really do suck. So, and then whenever you start getting kills and assists, this stacks up. All the runes in this row do. They're based off Bounty Hunter stacks, and then with these, you gain more value out of the runes based on the unique kills and assists you get. So anytime you would have a successful play, you get more out of combat movement speed, and then that just helps you at all stages of the game, when you're resetting onto the map, when you're going from camp to camp, whenever you're fighting around objectives, whenever you're positioning in the enemy jungle, whenever you're going to ward. Like, it just helps you at all stages. And especially with the supportive nature that Fiddlesticks has, especially mid game and late game when you have to position for flanks for a successful ult, it really helps. It's really, really solid rune. If you play without it and then play with it, you're really going to feel it. Ultimate Hunter is just not necessary. Fiddlesticks doesn't rely on his ult that much, even though the ult is really important. With Ultimate Hunter, you get 5% ultimate cooldown reduction. Cool. So you get 1 kill and assist with, let's say, 1 ult. Then you have 9% cooldown reduction on the ult. That really isn't that much. It's about like 10 seconds off your ult, which isn't gonna like change anything in the early game. And then come mid game, you're just not gonna have as many opportunities to ult like on cooldown, even if it was up. And then late game, that's even more true. So by the time this would be stacked up, it doesn't really matter. And to miss out on Relentless Hunter feels so bad. You don't need the healing from Ravenous Hunter, as your champion just burst one target and then kills everyone or dies. The Ravenous Hunter healing isn't going to make or break that. You also don't need it with your early clear compared to like a champion like Karthus. For the secondary runes, I think your best bet is Sorcery with Nimbus Cloak and Water Walking. Absolute Focus isn't terrible, but you do trade off a bit with Water Walking. But the most important rune here is Nimbus Cloak. With Nimbus Cloak, after you cast a summer spell, you gain a movement speed increase that lasts for 2.5 seconds and allows you to pass through units. The movement speed increase is based on the cooldown of the summoner spell that you cast. So the longer the cooldown, the more movement speed you get. So this is going to be used on your smite and your flash, which is so important because it lets you ult, you Q, you blue smite, and then you run the enemy down, you E, and then you W. Like, that's the combo, and Nimbus Cloak just helps you stay on the targets and also potentially get on their entire team with your ult. So you're effectively buying a lot of damage with Nimbus Cloak most of the time. And that movement speed is so important. In the early game, if you happen to complete Blue Smite on, let's say, your third recall, then you have the utility in which whenever you go for ganks, it helps you a bit too. If the enemy is invading you, you have some defensive utility in it, as you could fear them and then blue smite and run away. So if in the worst situations it helps you, in neutral situations it helps you, and then in offensive situations it really, really, really helps you. For water walking and absolute focus give you about the same amount of ability power. The difference is that with water walking, you get the ability power through being in the river, and then with absolute focus, you get it through being above 70% HP, which Fiddlesticks is most of the game. But with water walking, you also gain 25 movement speed whenever you're in the river. So I think absolute focus is fine, but I think water walking is better because you're basically always fighting around objectives. Given the nature of Fiddlesticks ult, that's when you're going to get the most value out of it. And in those fights, having more movement speed is equating to more damage. Water walking also helps you with Scuttle, which is the hardest camp for Fiddlesticks to do, weirdly enough. And then it's going to help you whenever you're approaching for ganks before you're level 6, or even whenever you're responding to fights. It's going to help you move around the map. And it helps you whenever you're invading the enemy jungle too. Not to just kill the enemy champion, but then if, let's say, you're vertical jungling, or just invading for the camps, then it gives you the movement speed to get into their jungle and then out of it safely. If you're running away from lanes too, it can help you in that sense too. So movement speed is just so important for Fiddlesticks, as you can see with these runes. And then for the shards, I think Adaptive Force, and Armor is just the most solid. You could probably get away with cooldown reduction, but I don't think it's needed, as Fiddlesticks has really, really good AP ratios. And he also has per 50 AP ratios on his Q, and it's important to hit those. And you can get to it in many different ways with water walking, the double adaptive force offered from runes, and then obviously with your itemization. And then the armor, you can run magic resist in an AP matchup. It's completely fine, as you would still be able to clear. You'd still be able to do 2 camps at once and do a full clear without dying to camps with the magic resist. But generally the armor is going to be more useful in the early game. So yeah, that's my thoughts for the default runes for Fiddlesticks. This would be what I would run every single time. Is if you're looking for a setup, which I'm sure a lot of people are, this is your best bet. Now, for the rest of this video, I'm just going to be like kind of exploring the options of like what's there for Fiddlesticks and my thoughts on them so far, like literally 2 or 3 days into the Champions rework. But again, I have been playing a lot of it. So, great champion too. I love him. With Dark Harvest, the benefit of it is that you have this stacking component. So even if skirmishes, ganks aren't lethal, then you're still stacking up Dark Harvest, and then that is going to be just infinite scaling into the late game. So I think at higher MMRs, that's a better feature because things are just way more even at higher MMRs, and then a rune that would benefit from that more with the stacking component of it is good. Where you can damage multiple enemies with it too, that's also good. But I don't think Fiddlesticks is a hyper carry in a lot of ways because of like just the nature of how the champion functions. If you get a 5-man ult and it's completely successful, and you could solo kill the entire enemy team with that, and Dark Harvest helps you do that more than Electrocute does. But I don't think that's necessary in almost every single like game instance. But at the highest level of play, maybe it could be. I would have to see it more. That's really my thoughts on it. And then for these secondary runes, I really think you have to beat Nimbus Cloak Water Walking. Whenever I first started playing Fiddlesticks, I was trying out Hextech Flash Cosmic Insight, and then I was also trying out Coup de Grace with Overheal. But they're just not that useful, and not having the movement speed is you're always just missing out on so much damage. For Inspiration Second, if you have Hextech Flash and Coup de Grace, like Hextech Flash is really fun, but I don't think it's that good as whenever, like let's say you Hextech Flash out of a bush in a river, you might kill mid lane, but you're not killing side lanes. If you do it in the lane, in the side lanes, I also don't think you're killing them because your champion isn't Blitzcrank. So like once you appear, the enemy's walking away, and then when you fear them, they're still walking away. The CC really isn't that major unless your ally laner has some CC for you, in which case Hextech Flash might be okay. A thing I don't like about it as well is that it shows the enemy that your flash is down, which is lame for most champions, but most champions that it's good on, ironically enough. With perfect timing, you could get a stopwatch at 14, and then it's lowered by getting kills and assists, but with this as well, you don't need Zhonya's early, and again, you're always trading off the movement speed from Water Walking Nimbus Cloak, so like Stopwatch plus Cosmic Insight doesn't beat Nimbus Cloak alone, much less Water Walking. The CDR from Cosmic Insight doesn't really do anything either for Fiddlesticks. It doesn't speed up your clear in any meaningful way that I've seen. And then whenever you're fighting, you're not going to get another Q and E off ever because of that 5% CDR. So it's really just not that useful. For these secondary runes, I suppose you could run Gathering Storm. That would be fine at higher MMRs. That would give you probably more scaling than Dark Harvest would because of Fiddlesticks' ridiculous AP ratios. You could also go Transcendence, I suppose, if you had a more CDR-oriented build, because maybe at 40% CDR you could start getting multiple Q and E's off in a fight. And that would be really, really useful at a higher MMR in which the fights would be way, way extended, so you would have to function beyond your initial ult. Nullifying Orb, even if you're against a lot of AP damage, I think you're better off trying to get the magic resist through itemization than you would be Nullifying Orb. But if it was like really brutal matchups like LeBlanc or something, maybe you could just try for Nullifying Orb. But the trade-off of Nimbus Cloak obviously feels bad. With Celerity, you don't need the extra movement speed from it, and the extra movement speed it offers isn't even that useful. And yeah, that's really it. Everything in the resolve tree is really, really bad. You don't need extra healing. The healing in your kit already is kind of whatever. It's really just about getting extra burst damage. So yeah. For support, for anyone who's interested, nothing has really changed. It's just Aftershock, Font of Black, Bone Plating, Overgrowth, Perfect Timing, Cosmic or Biscuit Delivery, and then Adaptive Force Armor. The Aftershock, because if you don't have Armored Magic Resist behind you, you die, and then you're just not a champion. You're gonna be getting more damage off and providing more utility through surviving longer in fights and getting multiple rotations of your Q and E off. Font of Life because your Q and E slows, and then giving your allies more effective HP is just more useful. If you had a pushing lane, maybe you could go Demolish. In solo queue too, it's fine to go Demolish. With Bone Plating, you're just getting more effective HP. The healing from Second Wind isn't good enough, and then the stats offered from Conditioning also just aren't that useful. If you had a non-lane in which both supports are going to roam, or you have a naturally losing lane, maybe in Conditioning's fine, but the effective HP from Bone Plating is just generally more useful in most matchups and in solo queue in general. With Overgrowth, you get more effective, or you get more actual HP, and then with that, you are just tankier. And then Perfect Timing because your support, if any kills and assists, lowers the cooldown of it a lot, and then just gives you more playmaking potential. It's not to build Zhonya's first. I think your build path on support is probably like Zeke's into Locket, as weird as that sounds. Maybe Zeke's into Shirelia's, actually. I don't know. Support itemization for Fiddlesticks gets really weird. Maybe you just build AP like a Savage, I guess. But I think Zeke's into Shirelia's into like, I don't know. Zeke's, Shirelia's, or maybe Righteous Glory. Maybe Righteous Glory. Geez, Righteous Glory actually sounds pretty good. Anyways, with Biscuit Delivery, every 2 minutes until 6, you get a biscuit, and then consuming a biscuit restores 12% of your missing health and mana, and then it permanently increases your mana by 50. This is really important as a lot of what you're doing is spamming your E early, and then your Q. And then with biscuits, they also give you an extra laning tool, so that if you're completely out of mana, then you can use it for one more spell cast or to like barely survive an all in. And then double Adaptive Force because you need to have damage behind your abilities. And Fiddlesticks' AP ratios are really good, even if you're not getting a lot of AP early. So the double Adaptive Force in combination with Relic Shield early is going to do enough for you. So yeah, I don't think any of the damage runes for support are good at all. Something like Arcane Comet, you really need to like get a grip, because if you're running Arcane Comet on Fiddlestick support, you are like a terrible version of Morgana or something. Terrible version of Brand, Vel'Koz, Xerath, etc. There's still a lot of utility in Fiddlesticks CC, and in the support role, the best way to get more CC off is to survive, to get another cast of your CC abilities, which the Resolve Tree helps by giving you and your allies more effective HP to play with. So, yep, that's my thoughts on Fiddlesticks runes. I really, really like the rework. If this video helped you, leave a like on the video, helps me. You have to subscribe, you just have to, or else, I don't know, I can't threaten you. And then a lot of Fiddlestick stuff in the description. A lot of his clear paths and whatnot, different videos that I've done. So check those out, or else, man. Bye-bye. See ya. Thanks for watching, man. I really, really like Fiddlesticks. I really like the rework. They knocked it out of the park. The old Fiddlesticks was so jank, so whack. What, support Fiddlesticks presses E on the wave and AFKs? Whatever, man. But, yeah, check out the clear videos. They're so cool, man. But, what was I even saying?